and share the screen with you. Let me bring up Zoroastrianism slideshow. Okay. All right, start recording. Okay. All right, guys, see this one okay?
Yes, sir.
Zoroastrianism, worship of Ahura Mazda. And the symbol here is of Ahura Mazda. And you see this very common symbol in Zoroastrianism. So the source of Zoroastrianism is from the Aryan nomadic migration from Europe to India and Persia around 1500 BC. You'll see that this is also the source of what later will become Hinduism as well. But the theory is that they migrated from this area of Eastern Europe around there, and around 1500 BC. The Achaemenid period would be 558 to 330, and then the Greek period from 330 AD to 226. So as we go through a historical background to it, we'll be looking at those periods. So the Aryan period was a time of animal sacrifice, so similar to Judaism in that regard. And fire had a sacred aspect. Now, we know in Judaism that fire in the temple had to be a special fire. You just didn't use any fire. And so notice that there's a tie there. They had divas, which is the Indian way of talking about them, or divas in Iranian, being that were worshipped, being who was worshipped. The root word is for div, to shine, or divas, the shining ones, which we would put into English divinities or deities, and you could have a supreme deity, but you could also have lower deities as well, and lesser gods in some case, like you see in Hinduism, and things like that. But there was an emphasis on the all-powerful one God. And the worship of divas, one of this shows up in Roman culture. Is called Mithra, the god Mithra, the god of truth and light. In India, this god was Mitra, and so you have different ways this god was talked about. You find in first century of Christianity, one of the main gods worshipped by the Roman army, armed forces, was Mithra. And so there was behind some of the polytheism, the monotheistic God, that there is only one single God. So the divas, plural, were generally originally got their source from the single god, known in Indian sources as Dies Pitrar, Father God. So you can see that if you go back to the monotheism of Judaism, that this correlates with that in the same time period. In Persia, or what we would call Iran today, he is Uruwana, or Ahura Mazda. literally meaning the wise Lord. And so, and just like we talked about in the introduction to world religions, and we looked at the German scholar Schmidt, where he said that all religions have a aspect of monotheism in their background. Now, that's what we see here as well. And it's in the background of Hinduism, which will be highly polytheistic, but in Iran, not so polytheistic, but will put more emphasis on the one God, and eventually with Islam take in one God. But until Islam comes along, they were polytheistic in that area. Professional priesthood, this was the ones who knew the secret and formulas for the proper methods used. These were called magi or carpins. Now, we were familiar with the magi because some magi came from the east, and to find the king that was born, and they saw the star in the sky and went and found it. We have that story in the New Testament. And yeah, this is probably where they came from, most likely. So as it moves forward from the Persian period into the Achaemenid period, there's a degeneration towards increased ritual and magic, and this is not a particularly strong period for them. There were Achaemenid kings like Cyrus, Xerxes, Artaxerxes, Darius. This during the Persian period in the Bible, and they probably recognized Ahura Mazda as as a leading god among many. And you know, when Cyrus or Xerxes or Xerxes or Darius are mentioned in the Bible, you know, we see them talking sometimes as if there's one God, and you know, how much they were thinking like the God of the Bible in the Old Testament compared to like Ahura Mazda, we can't tell, but they certainly gave credit to a powerful God oftentimes. During this period, this would be the Persian Empire during this time period of the Achaemenid thing. So, and you can see, you know, Persia is controlling even the Holy Lands over here. And that's why we see this stuff in the Bible. All right. The custodians of Zoroastrianism were the Magi that we talked about a minute ago, who came to visit Jesus. But under the Persian, Ahura Mazda was incorporated into the pantheon of the gods. So although it was a powerful god, and some people would worship him as one god, he was one among many. But the Magi are basically priests of Zoroastrianism, which at that time was the official religion of Persia. Other than that, we have very little information about the Magi, and that they were in charge of the sacrificial system. There was a thing called homa, a drink that they could drink, and it was a hallucinogenic type of thing. So they drink it and have these hallucinogenic experiences. That was their way of connecting with God. But yet these are some of the guys that saw the star and brought gifts at the birth of Jesus. And so, you know, it was just a reminder that though they weren't worshiping God exactly as he was wanting, they had some sense of this one God and that God does things. So we have to can't figure out exactly just how much we can put on emphasis we can put on all of this, but it is interesting how it progresses from here. So in their theology, you have the evil spirit, Angra Mainyu, who opposes Ahura Mazda. And he's basically seeks to divert people from following the commands of Ahura Mazda. Now, some have looked at Zoroastrian says there's a real, almost complete dualism. There's an all-powerful evil God versus an all-powerful good God. Well, mainly it's not that way. It's the dualism is not completely complete dualism because they're not of equal power. And I think for the most part in Zoroastrianism, although that at times it sounds like that power is as powerful as Ahura Mazda, in reality, most of the time it talks about it as not as powerful as Ahura Mazda. And so, but it sometimes has been discussed as if they have equal power. The Angra Mainyu in Zoroastrianism, for the most part in their theology, they say the Angra Mainyu is inferior to Ahura Mazda, and in fact is derived from God, just like in Christianity when we talk about Satan. Well, generally the view is that he was an angel created of God who used his free will to rebel against God, but again, he's derived from God, just like Angra Mainyu here is derived from God. Other descriptions of him are he's the offspring of God. He fits a role similar to Satan in Judaism and Christianity and Islam. In the end, Ahura Mazda will win the war. There will be this, war between Ahura Mazda and Angra Mainyu, but in the end, Ahura Mazda will win. Now, whether a person internally, Ahura Mazda will win his heart, or that is up to the person in the Zoroastrian thinking. Greek period, 330 BC to 8226. The Persians conquered in 330 and by Alexander the Great, and it didn't become the main religion. You had polytheistic Greek polytheism that would be the main thing brought in with Alexander the Great, but among the common people it would be continued to be practiced. You would see the cult of Mithra, which we talked about earlier, of Roman soldiers. And Mithra kind of held some of the same ideas as Ahura Mazda. And so they kind of got blended together to some. But yet it was seen as a supreme god that all other gods worship. Even Ahura Mazda would be kind of subsumed under Mithra. Mithra was symbolized by the invincible sun and associated with truth and light. And there are a few descriptions of the worship with Mithra. There was an initiation rite the Roman soldiers would undergo, and basically they put them in a hole with a grid over them, and then they'd bring a bull and gut the bull over them. All the blood and guts would run out and fall all over the soldier, and that was part of the initiation rite for that. But it was a popular religion at that time, and Ahura Mazda kind of got mixed in with that. The Sassanid dynasty, 226 to 637 AD. There was a new dynasty of Persian kingdoms until the conquest of the Muslims. And so this became a golden age for Zoroastrianism. So it made a resurgence at this point. And here you have Avesta, which became the first and basic scriptures of Zoroastrianism. So notice main scriptures for Zoroastrianism come from a lot later period than when it had its beginnings. You would see things built like this. These are called towers of silence, and they would be storage places for the dead, bodies of the dead people. And there you can still see them around in different parts of the Middle East to this day. Zoroastrianism at its prime, it collected its scriptures. Other times it was, they tended, there would be times when it seemed to get mixed with polytheism, but the worst polytheistic parts are removed by this Sassanid dynasty period. And so Ahura Mazda is also called Mazda, is the supreme God. Even though they may recognize other deities like Mithra, Asha, and others, and then there's the lesser spirits like angels and evil spirits. But Ahura Mazda is the supreme ruling God. Despite the fact there was a tendency towards the dualism, and there are parts of the scriptures which seem to point towards that dualism we talked about earlier. That is really still, for the most part, overcome by the power of Ahura Mazda. So there are created beings by Ahura Mazda, but there were also beings created by Angra Mainyu in some teachings as well. And so Angra Mainyu, its other name is Ahriman, and Ahriman has his own beings that he creates as well, and called divine sparks, and this was Amisha Spintas. These are divine sparks, so you have this dichotomy again showing up as well, and we'll look at some of these divine sparks in here in a second. Ritual purity is the most important part of Zoroastrianism. And they used these rituals and magic to ward off the evil Amisha Spintas, or these divine sparks, as they're called. And on the good side, they show good qualities or moral qualities. Let's just look at some here. These are 6 divine beings, or sometimes they're called archangels, created by Ahura Mazda, and they're to help govern the creation. And so you got truth and justice here, and here's the names here. But wholeness, integrity, health, and completion, good mind, intelligence, good thinking, holy serenity, devotion, deathlessness and immortality, righteous power, peace and democracy in action would fall under each one of these. And so you can see there's a large theology being produced about Zoroastrianism. All right, I think I'm past where I was going to stop, so let me stop there, and let me see here, and I'll restart it here in a minute. Please stop sharing.